Hello, I'm Anna Maria Tremonti, and you're listening to The Current. Still to come, you might want to hold off on uncorking that bottle of Merlot. New research proves we've been guzzling misinformation about the health benefits of red wine. It might leave you wondering which studies to believe. We will discuss. But first, a frank discussion about sex, sexuality, and orientation, and a different sort of mystery on Baker Street.
You don't have a girlfriend then?
Girlfriend? No, not really my area.
Oh, right. Do you have a boyfriend? Which is fine, by the way.
I know it's fine.
So you've got a boyfriend?
No.
Right, okay. You're unattached, like me.
While Dr. John Watson accepts the ambiguity of Sherlock's sexual orientation, many fans of the BBC series have enjoyed guessing if the iconic detective favors male or female company. But another sexual orientation could solve the mystery of Sherlock's disinterest in carnal pleasure: asexuality. An asexual person doesn't experience sexual attraction, but there are lots of misconceptions about what asexuality means.
I'm sorry, I've never heard of that except in plants.
Why don't you just say celibate?
I don't think that's actually a thing humans can be.
But you masturbate.
Did you get this idea from the internet? Asexual or not, why don't you just try it?
Despite the confusion, those who identify as asexual say it is time they were recognized, and that to that end, the Asexual Visibility and Education Network will officially be part of World Pride events in Toronto next month, holding its own conference. In a moment, we'll hear from one of the Canadian pioneers of research into asexuality. But first, I'm joined by someone who identifies as asexual. Sam Godfrey is a student at McMaster University and co-editor of Insight magazine, a student-run monthly publication. And Sam Godfrey is in Hamilton. Hello.
Hey, hi, Anna Maria.
Well, can you tell me, what does being asexual mean to you?
At the most basic level, it's just that I don't experience sexual attraction to any gender.
Okay, and tell us a little bit more about the difference between sexual attraction and sexual desire.
Okay, so sexual desire can be just anything, wanting sex for any reason, whether it be biological or intimacy, closeness to other people, whereas sexual attraction is when you, well, I mean, I don't know, but when people feel the need to go and when they want to sleep with someone in particular, kind of thing.
Okay, and how did you come to realize that you are asexual?
Well, it's a bit tough since it's defined as a lack of something. So when you don't know what that thing is, it's hard to identify whether or not you don't have it. But I think basically when you start Googling what does sexual attraction feel like, that's a good indication. So I've kind of always known, but when I found out that it was a legitimate orientation, that's when I was comfortable identifying as that way.
And how old were you when you began feeling there was something you needed to figure out about that?
Well, I guess as soon as people start talking about that kind of thing, you start wondering about your own self. So maybe around 14 or something, I knew something was up, but I wasn't sure, and I wasn't really concerned. And then when I was in first year university, I first heard the term asexual and looked it up and was like, okay, this makes sense now.
Okay, so before that, nobody had really talked to you about it?
Oh, no. Had never even heard of it.
Okay, and so when you went public and started talking about it, what was that like?
I don't really feel the need to talk about it that much. The people that I've come out to, they're very nice people, very lovely people. They've all been understanding and accepting. It's mostly things that I read, secondhand accounts or people that I overhear talking about it, not to me directly, but talking about it that maybe say some hurtful things or just because they don't know, a bit ignorant things.
But you identify as pan-romantic. What does that mean?
So there's a difference between the sexual spectrum and the romantic spectrum. That's not to say that for a lot of people that isn't meshed together into one thing. But for me, romanticism and asexuality are totally different things. So, it depends, obviously, on each person where they draw the lines or if they draw lines at all. But for me, romanticism is wanting, having a crush on someone, but there's no need. I don't feel the need to sleep with them. And that's still like, kissing people and stuff like that. That falls into romanticism. Maybe hand holding, again, it varies for everyone.
Okay, so affection. So you can still feel great affection for someone and romantically. I'm getting the terminology wrong, but towards someone, but not needing to have sex with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So just basically feelings that people might feel towards a romantic partner without the pants stuff kind of thing.
Okay, and so can you tell me a little bit about how being asexual affects your personal life? Can you date then, or do you date? Do you in a relationship?
Yeah, no, I can. Just like with any relationship, it's just important to be communicative and open about this kind of thing. So I think that actually in a lot of ways, my sexuality has helped me be a better person in relationships. That's a sort of grandiose claim, but just because I know that there are a lot of things that I have to discuss. So right off the bat, I know that I have to be open and communicate these things if I want to be in a healthy relationship.
And what's the reaction when you first broach that subject?
It varies, but it's generally very good. It's not like it takes some time to understand, but I think it's very important, or else the other person is going to feel hurt that they're not feeling wanted in that way, because that's very important for many people.
That many people would see that as a level of rejection.
Exactly. So I don't want them to feel rejected, because it's not that they're not great in that way. It's just I don't have the capacity to feel for them in that way.
Okay. And are you in a relationship now?
Yes.
Okay. And so when you have how do you see your relationship as different from others beyond the sex? The same except for sex?
Yeah, the same except for sexual attraction. It's not like asexual people can't get physically aroused, or it's not like, we still have genitals, obviously. So it's not like there's a difference like that. That literally the only marking difference is that I don't feel sexual attraction.
So is the word indifferent to sex an accurate phrase?
Yeah, basically, actually, there's a interesting spectrum of where asexual people fall vis-a-vis sex, and it sort of goes from sex repulsed, which is exactly what it sounds like, to sex indifferent, which is just also exactly what it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so does an asexual person have to be in a relationship with another asexual person? Not necessarily.
Definitely not. No, just all about communication, right?
Okay. And I don't mean to be flippant, but there are those who would say they are in a relationship where one person seems indifferent. Mm-hmm. But this is different.
Yeah, this is definitely different. That's something that they should talk about, and maybe that's something that one of the partners need to explore. But I don't think that's always the case. I think, again, I think that was a good use of the word flippant, is that, it's thrown around to talk about this kind of thing, but is not necessarily accurate.
And it doesn't actually recognize then what asexuality is, right?
No.
So what are the misconceptions around it that you confront, or that you hear, that you kind of roll your eyes then? What do other people need to know?
Well, I think that we've covered a bunch about it. I think the difference between sexual attraction and sexual desire, libido, things like that, people often tie those together. And I'm not saying that's wrong, because for a lot of people it is tied together. But those can in fact be separate things. And the difference between, for a lot of people, sexuality and romanticism, that's another misconception. Obviously not asexual people are celibate. A lot of asexual people enjoy masturbation. They're not empty of sexual capacity. They just don't experience sexual attraction. That's really the most base level explanation of it, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at your own wants for your future, you want a relationship? Do you want children? Do you know yet?
Well, I'm pretty young, so it's hard to say. But as of right now, I don't want children. I don't think that's related to my asexuality at all. But if I honestly haven't really. I'm only 20, right? So I haven't really thought that far in advance.
Okay, fair enough. Mm-hmm. And you're allowed to change your mind.
Absolutely.
But in terms of asexuality, it is an orientation. It's not about you choosing.
No, that would be the difference between asexuality and celibacy, which is a choice to remain chaste, I guess.
And why is it important to you to be open in this way, to actually have this discussion with sort of a wider audience?
I think that it can be very confusing if people don't know that it's a valid orientation that healthy people can have. It was very confusing for me. And I think that if people just know that it's out there and sort of an option is a strange way of putting it, but if they know it's on the table, they may choose it, or not choose it. Again, choose it's the wrong word, but they might know that it's okay.
It, right?
Yeah, they might understand it. So people who are themselves asexual, and it's just important for other people to understand, because it's just healthy to try to take an interest in other people's lives, I guess.
Okay, good answer. Sam Godfrey, thanks for speaking with me today.
Thank you very much.
That is Sam Godfrey, a student at McMaster University and co-editor of Insight magazine, and we reached her in Hamilton, Ontario. Well, if most Canadians don't know much about asexuality, the scientific community is not much further ahead. Dr. Laurie Brotto is the director of the UBC Sexual Health Laboratory and associate professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at UBC. She says there was not much medical research into asexuality when her team began to study it in 2002. Since then, she has conducted about a dozen studies.
The main findings in our research are that asexuality is probably best classified as a unique sexual orientation. Through our research, we've tested out some of the circulating ideas that asexuality might be the result of early childhood trauma or early negative sexual experiences, and our research has not found that to be true. We've also tested out and ruled out the possibility that asexuality is an expression of a sexual dysfunction or a problem with desire and arousal. So our research really points to asexuality being best classified as a sexual orientation, probably best considered something that has arisen out of early development in utero as opposed to something that happened later on in life.
Well, for more on the latest research about asexuality, I'm joined by Anthony F. Bogart. He is a professor of health sciences and psychology at Brock University and the author of Understanding Asexuality. He is in St. Catharines, Ontario. Hello.
Hello.
What more can you tell us about what it means to be asexual?
Well, I agree with the definitions that have been put forward in terms of asexuality being a lack of sexual attraction. So if someone doesn't have any lustful kind of connection to other people, that's a good way of putting it. Some people may still have a kind of solitary level of desire, so they may have some interest in masturbating, for example, but they don't connect that desire to other people. And so a good way of really defining asexuality, at least from my perspective, is, again, a lack of sexual attraction.
Okay. Is that the same as disinterest?
It's certainly a disinterest to have sex with other people. And so there may be a kind of general disinterest that someone has on average to sexuality, period. But most asexual people may still have some level of sort of solitary or kind of a diffuse sexual desire that they just don't connect to other people. So there's a kind of genital kind of sensation that may occur, and they may end up being interested in masturbating, but they just don't connect that desire to other people.
Okay, and that doesn't necessarily mean they won't have sex with other people, though.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that at all. They may still have arousal experiences, and they may still function in terms of having erections or vaginal lubrication, and may still have sex with other people, but they just don't have any kind of real connection to that sex with other people. So it may be the case that someone may end up having sex with a person because they're trying to please their partner. But there's lots of asexual people who wouldn't necessarily have any kind of sex whatsoever. But there may be some who may end up still having some level of sex with other people to please a romantic partner.
How prevalent is asexuality?
Well, in my book, I suggest that it's probably a good working figure to suggest about 1% of the population, although we don't know for sure. There's been national probability samples, so well-conducted samples that have looked at people who indicate that they don't have any sexual attraction for other people. And a couple of those studies have suggested that it's about 1%. But there are issues with any kind of national probability sample in terms of who gets in the sample still. Also, there's issues with regard to whether or not statistical kinds of techniques are used in certain ways and so on. So there are issues with the exact prevalence of asexuality. We don't know for sure, but I think 1% is a good working figure.
Okay, but no more?
It's possible that there's more people who are asexual who don't get into national probability samples. So, for example, in sex surveys, if someone calls you up and says, do you want to be in this sex survey? And if you're an asexual person, you have no interest in sex whatsoever. And some people don't have any interest in sex, no masturbation, no nothing, no solitary interest as well. They may go, well, no, I'm not interested in being in this survey. Well,
so then they're not counted, right? But is it predominantly male or female? Can you tell?
Some of my research suggests that there's more women than men. And so one of the surveys that I ended up looking at found that about 70% of the asexual people were women and about 30% were men.
It was originally seen as a psychiatric disorder. It is now an orientation. What was the change there? Talk to us a little bit about the understanding of asexuality.
Well, some of Laurie Brado's work has influenced that, and probably some of my own work has influenced that. One of the reasons why I consider it to be a sexual orientation is because sexual attraction is all about sexual orientation. Sexual orientation is all about sexual attraction. And so if people are attracted to the opposite sex, they're heterosexual. If they're attracted to the same sex, it's homosexual. If they're attracted to both sexes, it's bisexual. And if they're attracted to no sex, it's asexuality. And so there's a kind of theoretical connection there to sexual orientation that probably people really didn't recognize before. And so that's one of the reasons. And also, I think people have had a bit of a backlash against the medicalization of sexuality. And if someone is not really distressed about their lack of sexual attraction or their lack of sexual interest, I think people are starting to recognize, including medical people, that maybe this is not really a disorder. And so the combination of backlash a little bit against medicalization of sex and also the recognition that it can be construed as a sexual orientation, those two things in combination have probably made it less likely to be seen as a disorder.
So are you saying there should be LGBT and A?
Well, I think that movement is already there, and I'm certainly comfortable with that. I think it's reasonable. I think it is a sexual minority that hasn't really been recognized, and it's not really been put on the sexual landscape until recently. And so I think it is a reasonable sort of addition to other sexual minority groups, yes.
Are there rights to fight for asexual people?
I think there is. As your participant suggested, there is some discrimination against asexual people.
Like what?
Well, there's some interesting research that suggests that asexual people are actually seen more negatively by straight people relative to gays and lesbians. They're oftentimes seen as freaks, for lack of a better word, and also seen as less than human sometimes. So it's interesting. There is a kind of distrust, I guess, and also a kind of foreignness that people perceive when they're thinking about and talking about asexual people. And it's partly a lack of understanding, right? It's someone who's different than them. And also sexuality is something that challenges us to some degree, so that's probably one of the reasons as well.
What's the relation like between asexuals and other sexual minorities?
I think it's relatively good. I think on average, gay and lesbians, for example, are very accepting of other sexual minorities, for example, transgendered people. But there's probably also a little bit of tension that sometimes comes up when there's a new kid on the block, so to speak. So that's probably to some degree what occurs in that context. But on average, I think that gays and lesbians, for example, are oftentimes very accepting of other minorities.
And from your research, how do asexuals navigate dating and relationships?
Well, it's complicated. If you're a sexual person and looking for a sexual/romantic partner, you usually think that, my partner is going to be sexual just like me. And if that's not the case, then that's makes it complicated. It may be the case that some asexual people still function within a sexual realm and still end up having sexual activity with a partner to please their partner. But that probably still creates a certain level of tension. And it's probably also the case that most asexual people would rather not have sex, even if they still can function that way. So there's probably some tension there as well.
And how many people who are asexual end up in relationships long term?
In one of the studies that I ended up conducting, there was about 60%, and this was a fairly well-conducted national sample, and about 60% of these individuals had some kind of long-term relationship. So it's probably the case that the majority of asexual people, at least throughout their lives, will engage in some kind of romantic kinds of a relationship with someone.
Mm-hmm. But in terms of being in a romantic relationship with somebody who is not asexual and someone who is asexual, any way to measure that?
There is ways of measuring it, but I've never done that myself, and I don't think other people who have conducted asexual research have actually looked at that. It is a good question in terms of the percentage of asexual people in romantic relationships who are bonded to another asexual person versus bonded to a sexual person. It is an interesting question.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time, so I guess I better leave it there. But thank you for your insights today.
Okay. You're welcome.
That is Anthony F. Bogart. He's a professor of health sciences and psychology at Brock University and author of Understanding Asexuality. He joined us from St. Catharines, Ontario. And if you want to comment on what either he or our previous guest were saying, go to the website, cbc.ca/thecurrent. You can call us toll free. The number is 1-877-287-7366. And a reminder, if you miss anything, go to the website, cbc.ca/thecurrent, and download the podcast. Coming up, health reporters may take up drinking after a new study casts a stain on the benefits of red wine. Or take up something. Anyway, the value and credibility of science journalism coming up in our next half hour as we look at studies. I'm Anna Maria Tremonti. This is The Current on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM, and online on cbc.ca/thecurrent.